can keep it right here because we're bringing in our panel to help break down what's to be expected here and how significant this is. Steve Hayes is the senior writer of the Weekly Standard and a Fox News contributor, and Bernard Whitman is a former pollster for President Bill Clinton. Afternoon, gentlemen. All right, so Steve, let me start with you. That's the thing that jumped out at me in the headlines was, okay, it seems like a good idea to have 47 nations in, to have a summit, to talk about control of nuclear material, since we've got terrorists out there who want to kill us and would love to get their hands on it. But why hasn't this already been done under President Bush or earlier in the Obama administration? At some point, this vulnerable nuclear material, the so-called loose nuclear material, is floating around out there, and nothing much has been done until now?
Yeah, well, it's clearly one of those things that you have had a very loud but small minority interest group on the side yelling and screaming, hey, pay attention to this. This is a serious issue. And it seems to me that they've finally gotten their full public hearing now. This is important, I think. I think President Obama actually deserves to be commended for bringing this issue to the fore, for spending some time focusing on it, and for trying to find a way that we can have some verifiable means of understanding where all these loose nukes are and who might be able to get their hands on them. The thing that concerns me going into this and potentially coming out of the summit is, whether we're really doing some handshaking, some self-congratulating, but not actually accomplishing much. So what coming out will be binding, what coming out will be verifiable, and what, even though they're not going to directly address the issue of North Korea and Iran, what's happening on North Korea and Iran? You have that very immediate issue that seems to be taking a back seat to these other issues.
But isn't, Bernard, North Korea and Iran are obviously very important when it comes to nuclear capacity and the potential for it. But Pakistan is also very important because they have the nuke, and they also have a lot of terrorists inside their borders who would love to get their hands on those nukes and to use them against America. So how important is Pakistan's participation in this today?
Absolutely critical. I mean, I'm, of course, displeased that Israel didn't come to the summit, but the fact that both India and Pakistan are there, I think, speaks volumes to the opportunity to finally make some real progress on this issue. And the truth is, there are reports that there is enough loose nuclear material out there to make almost 100,000 weapons. And so we have got to institute safeguards and processes and procedures that not only catalog this information, but agree on best practices and safeguards to secure the material and prevent it from being stolen or otherwise diverted. And I think that the president does deserve an enormous amount of credit for bringing together 47 world leaders to deal with this really in a global way for the very first time. It's the biggest gathering of world leaders that we've seen called by an American president since the founding of the UN by Roosevelt in 1945. But if and I agree with Stephen on this point, if the summit ends without a specific set of clear, concrete steps that these nations can agree to finally begin to lock down some of this loose nuclear material, then I think we can all say it was just so much back padding. But I do believe that the president actually will come out with some real steps on this.
Okay, so we'll look for that. But Steve, let me ask you this. Let's say everybody leaves and they have something that's real. They put some pen to paper and they're going to secure loose nuclear materials. We've been watching this government in Pakistan basically implode recently. And there was a lot of question over the past year about who was going to be in charge over there and whether they were going to be in a position to stop terrorists from getting their hands on the nukes that were there. So my question to you is, what should the Obama administration be doing to protect us against, it's nice to say let's prevent them from getting it. But if they get it, what needs to happen here in the United States to protect us against that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think there are a number of steps that they need to take, some of which were taken during the Bush administration, some of which I think the Obama administration continues to pursue to protect the homeland. But, the real problem in Pakistan is exactly as you point out. It's not just that there are terrorists inside the borders. It's that there are terrorists in high positions, not terrorists, but terrorist sympathizers in high positions within the Pakistani government. I mean, you've got people in the ISI, you've got people, high-ranking people in the army, who have access to some of this technology, to some of these nukes that I think could really present problems. And the question, I think, internally in Pakistan is determining who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, and how we can keep the bad guys from getting their hands on this. Should we see something like we saw, a year ago, where the government, the power in the central government seemed to dramatically decrease, and there were real questions about whether they were going to be able to safeguard this nuclear material at all.
Right. I got to go, Bernard, but I'll get your closing thoughts on that.
Oh, I think that the real key is to deal with trying to come up with safeguards in the immediate near term, because the truth is Pakistan and India are unfortunately terrible proliferators of these weapons, and what we really need is to engage them in a treaty for them to be able to begin limiting their nuclear weapons rather than building more.
Well, I mean, what's disconcerting, though, is the number that are already there and the number of terrorists who are near them.
And that's why we ought to focus on what we might be able to agree on, which is safeguarding the material that currently exists, and put off some of the other issues for a later date.
Well, we're watching it. We're going to see what they come up with out of the summit. When they take to the mics, we'll bring it to you. And we appreciate you, gentlemen, for your insights on it. Steve and Bernard, all the best.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.